Hey everyone, it's Jason Probst, that guy in Hutch, and you're listening to That Podcast in Hutch. Today, we're going to talk about trucking and the life of a trucker because you're hearing all this in the headlines, you're seeing it, you're reading it. You probably have read a lot of stories about how there's a trucker shortage, people are leaving the industry, or they're getting to retirement age and they're getting out of trucking. And you're seeing the results of some of these supply chain issues and some of these trucker shortage issues in your grocery store, or I should rather say you're not seeing it in your grocery store because you notice, just like I do, that there are places that are empty in the store and you're not seeing those things. So I want to talk about that today. And instead of going to industry experts, government experts, trucking associations, or any of those people who generally talk about this issue, I've decided that we will cut through all of that and we're going to go right to the source and talk to someone who's had a career in trucking and still has a career in trucking. So I'm going to introduce to you my friend, Tim Smith. Tim, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, first we got to be honest with people. You and I have known each other for a little bit.
Yeah, like 30 years probably. Yeah.
Yeah, we grew. We were in high school. We didn't go to the same high school, but we were friends in high school and started hanging out, much to our parents' chagrin. But somehow we managed to keep a friendship going all those years.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so I really want to just kind of give you the floor here and let you talk about this, but help people understand or just kind of paint a picture for them of what life is like as a long haul truck driver.
Okay, there's so many things to start out with, but let's just kind of take you through, or let's just say, I'll go back to one of my old jobs that I had, and you'd make a delivery like here in Kansas on like a Monday morning to start out your week. You got back too late to get it unloaded, the week before. So you start out, you make that delivery. Then you go and get where I worked out, they have a trailer preloaded for me. It was a flatbed company. So you just didn't hook up and drive it. You had to get out and secure everything down to the bed of the trailer to make sure it could go. Then once you do that, and as soon as you start your day, you have an electronic log. And it knows when the truck's moving. So you have to come in, you got to do a pre-trip inspection, make sure that all the wheels are still on your truck. You got air in your tires, you got oil, all your lights are working, all that stuff. And then once you do that, you started your clock for the day and you have 14 hours to get everything done in. So I would go do that, make a delivery, go get another trailer, get it all tied down. And this whole time you're using up time. Once you do that, then I would say take off. And let's just say, for instance, I was heading to the east. So you'd be going down I-70, you'd get through Kansas City, depending on how long all that other stuff took, would depend on how far you would get on to go that night. But because you can drive 11 of your 14 hours. But normally by the time you would do all that stuff, you'd probably be down to somewhere to 6 to 8 hours that you could get driving. So you'd probably get there where you'd run out of time about in the middle of St. Louis, and there's nowhere to park a truck there. So you would end up stopping somewhere west of St. Louis in Missouri. Then you go in, depending on, stop, get a shower, try to get something to eat, and then go to sleep so you could get ready to get moving again the next day. So the next day you wake up and first thing you do is you're like, where am I at? And you're like, wait, I'm in the truck. Okay, now where's the truck at? And then every day it was disorienting that way. And then you normally start out by urinating in a bottle because you don't have a restroom in your truck, and you probably can't hold it all the way till you walk into the truck stop. So that's always a great way to start. It's just, and then
and this is a thing that people really. These are the things that people don't realize, right?
Yeah. They don't realize that.
Yeah, every trucker has a pee bottle.
Yeah. And once you get that thing full, you got to figure out somewhere to dump it. You know, it's just it's gross, but especially when it's cold out, who wants to run in just to take a whiz?
Or if you wake up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and that's if you're lucky enough. Like I said, you're at a truck stop. Sometimes there's nowhere to park at a truck stop by the time you get there. You might be at a rest area. Well, at least you can go in and use the restroom. but you don't have any buy coffee. You can't buy anything to get you going. And you try to keep a lot of that stuff in your truck, but at the same time, you'll run out of stuff. You won't have whatever going on. So then you get up and you get going. And of course, because you had to stop before you could get through St. Louis, then you're fighting rush hour traffic all the way through it. Whereas in the old days, when you weren't totally monitored by an electronic logbook, you could have drove on that night and got the rush hour behind you, and you could have found somewhere to park over there. Well, that didn't work anymore. There's no way to get around that, which is always a debate I've had. Is it safer to let a guy drive longer so he's not clogging up the road the next day? Or do you just want to have that hard, fast rule to make a guy stop? Well, they decided it's a hard, fast rule, and you need to stop there. So anyway, so you take off and you go, 3 or 4 more hours. Somewhere along there, you're going to stop and buy fuel. And I don't know if people always understand, but you get paid by the mile. The place I worked at would give you a little bit for loading and unloading, a little bit more if you tarped. But I mean, even with the biggest, heaviest tarps, you would get $50 for the whole time you were there.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that is something that people don't really understand. So I know from, previous conversations with you, you're driving, like you said, when the truck's rolling, you're getting paid.
Yeah.
But you get pulled over by the highway patrol, and they have a special unit for trucks, right? Most states have special vehicle inspections.
Yeah, DOT cops.
Yeah. And they'll pull you over. That cuts into your time.
Yeah.
You're not getting paid for that. Loading and unloading, not getting paid for that.
Yeah, or you're getting paid a minimal.
Yeah.
Breakdowns, a lot of time, that's where I worked at. They'd get you a hotel room. They paid for that for you. But say you broke down on a Monday afternoon and they had you rolling again Tuesday afternoon, you wouldn't get any breakdown pay. Mm-hmm. Now, if you had to have one full 24-hour day from midnight to midnight, calendar day, that you were sitting still before you get any breakdown pay.
Okay.
So you're like, you just about hope if they called you up Tuesday afternoon, they just wait and call you up Wednesday morning. By then, you're not going to get anywhere Tuesday evening anyway, Yeah. But now they call you, and then so you wouldn't even get the pay for sitting around all day. That happened a lot. But you stop and get fuel. That's going to take 30 minutes to stop over, get into the truck stop, get your fuel put on. And that's just if you get fuel, use the restroom, grab a coffee, and get going. That's almost a minimum of 30 minutes. You're washing your windshield in, you're doing all this stuff, and you're not compensated for any of that either, and that's still time out of your day. And so you're doing this, and then where I worked at, we would make multiple stops along the way. So you're trying to get to these places to make your deliveries, and you get to one, you make a delivery, and you get everything tied back down, you get moving to the next one. Well, you're going to places that operate with regular business hours. So say you get to your first one at, around noon that day, and there's a chance they're at lunch. They're not going to unload you till 1 anyway.
Yeah.
And then you go and you get that going, and you got 2 hours to the next stop, so you make that just fine. And then the next one's only 30 minutes away, but they won't take any deliveries after 3:30. And so you're not going to be there in time. So right away, your day is over with at that point in time. And so, there you go. Now you're done making money for the day. And then, but that would be it. So you would work your way to get the truck unloaded. Then once you were done with that, you would have what we always call them backhauls. You would pick something up, and so you would go somewhere else and get loaded. Some places take appointments. And it seemed every time you had a place with an appointment would be when you would hit 3 traffic jams and a weather delay.
And you'd end up late.
You'd end up late. And then once you're late, you're really at their mercy. If they don't, they have first come, first serve. And it seems so many of those places, everybody's lined up, or you get there right after 3 other trucks just got there and you're all the way down on the list.
So you got to wait for those trucks to get unloaded. Again, you're not making money.
Yeah.
You're just waiting to get to a dock.
Yeah. Or to get to where because it was flatbeds, so we didn't have to really so much worry about docks, but you had to get to a loading spot.
Yeah.
And so they could come in and load you. Then once they have everything on you, then you would have to, tie it down, tarp it if necessary, and try to get going again. But then you would run into these things where they try to overload you. That didn't happen too much. Like if you're hauling steel sold by the pound, they pretty much knew how much they were putting on you. but I hauled a lot of lumber. Well, lumber's sold by the board foot. They don't care what it weighs. Well, anybody's ever cut down a tree, two trees have different moisture contents in them. Now, I know they put them in kilns and try to bake some of the moisture out, but they'd never have any idea what it was. And they wanted so many board feet on that truck.
And wet wood weighs a ton more than dry wood.
Yeah. And they wouldn't really, they treat, when the stuff's treated too, they put other stuff in there that makes it heavier. And they do all that. And, well, hey, I'm too heavy. Well, how do you know you haven't even weighed it yet? Well, because I know my truck. You have gauges in there that'll give you an idea, like air pressure and stuff. So, they didn't want to take your word for it. And so you're always arguing with them about being overloaded. Now, you can haul that, but you're responsible for any overweight tickets you get along the way.
We'll talk about this a little bit because we were talking a little bit before the show about this. And there's a couple of things you've talked about I want people to understand. But if you're heavy, if your load's heavy, because somebody else loaded too much and it's wet lumber and it weighs more than they thought it would weigh, and you get pulled over, you pay that ticket as the trucker. Right?
Yes.
And those aren't cheap fines, are they?
No. The overload's not as bad as maybe some other things, but no, they're not. And if you're overloaded by too much, they will park you right there and wait for, they'll have to hire somebody to come out, unload your truck, get the weight right. What happened to me a lot was, and then that's the thing that was real frustrating. If a place was shipping stuff like that, they didn't all have scales. Some of them did where you could weigh, and some places were great. They'd say, "Hey, we got you on. Let's go see if your weight's good. If it's good, tie it down, tarp it, and then come on in, and we'll give you your bills and get you on your way." But some places just wouldn't have that. Probably the worst thing that ever happened to me, I was clear up in Vermont. I had to drive. I got loaded up. And actually, my gauges weren't off. I thought I might be okay, but I was coming from there clear down to, like, say, Springfield, Missouri. It's a long ways to go to be overweight. So I drove on over into New Hampshire. I'm in like a goat trail. It was winding. Trucks were allowed on it, but they shouldn't have been. And it was up and down these steep mountains up in that part of the world. Pull into the truck stop, and by this time, it was the last truck out of there that day. Go in and weigh, and I'm like almost 3,000 pounds overweight. So there's no way I was going to drive from there all the way to Missouri. If I only had to go 200 more miles, I'd have figured out a way to do it. But I wasn't going to back road it, to go around all these scales. So you end up, which this happens all the time. Truck drivers do all kinds of stuff they're not supposed to do because they're trying to get done, they're trying to get paid, they're trying to go home. So I ended up driving all the way back up on these terrible roads again to have them take off like 2 or 3 bundles of lumber. In the meantime, you got to do all this labor. You got to untarp the whole load, and do all this, and then turn around and come back to the same place to weigh it again. And that was, okay, now I'm legal. Now I can go. So, you think about that. That was from like probably 5 o'clock that evening. Place didn't open up again till like 8. I got there right after they opened, but by the time we did all that, and I'm back to where I'd been to the night before, we're talking like 10 or 11 in the morning. Yeah. I've wasted like 18 hours just because they put too much weight on your truck. And, I can't even remember now if they paid me for backtracking or not, but they sure didn't give me another pickup fee, another drop fee. None of that. It was just, you got overloaded.
And your choice in that situation was do that or risk getting a series of tickets through multiple states as you make your way back.
Yeah. That was exactly your two options. And, and like I say, dude, there's plenty of times I've done it and everybody else I know that's done it. You're a little overweight. You get out the map, you see where the weigh stations are, and you hop on some other lesser highway and get around it. It happens all the time. And it probably shouldn't, but a lot of that I really think should fall on the shippers to make sure they have scales there to weigh the trucks so they know how much they're putting on you. So, but that would be, it was little things like that. Or you'd pull up to a place, and some places do have detention pay. If you have a 2 o'clock appointment and they don't get you, but it's normally ridiculous. If they don't start loading you until 3, that's okay. They got a 2 or 3 hour window there before they even have to start thinking about it. Yeah. And then sometimes it's when they start loading you, and then it might take them forever to still get you loaded. So, if they start loading you within that window, then they're free and clear. And they don't have to pay you the detention pay. And the detention pay would go to the company, and the company would only give you a part of it anyway.
Yeah.
So
they keep a little part of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's, like I said, there's a couple of things I want to touch back on. Talk to me about hours. I think generally people kind of have a concept like trucks can only be on the road so many hours a day, but kind of explain that formula to everyone. How many hours you can be on a road, how many days in a row you can be, and what your limits are.
Well, you work on like a 70-hour, 7-day cycle. That's how most guys run it. So within those 7 days, you got 70 hours total and a maximum of 14 a day. And that 14 a day, you can be driving for 11. But another thing they threw at us here a little while ago was 8-hour before you can only drive 8 hours without or only be on duty for 8 hours before you took a break. So here in the middle of the day, you're making good time. You're coming up on Nashville, but it's 2 p.m. Oh no, man, you don't got enough time. So then you got to stop and take your break. Well, that gets over with. It's 2:30, and then the rush hours hit. I mean, or you're coming up too, but you realize you got to stop. By the time you get it over with and you get going, you're caught in rush hour, and you're going to lose a bunch of time that way. And like I say, when it comes down to there's no way to, like I say, back in the day, if they gave you an 8-hour break, there's a reason they called logbooks funny books. Guys would keep 3 or 4 of them at a time to make them all look good, or they'd have pages they'd tear out like a loose leaf binder and just get rid of them. So they'd always be fixing their books to make it look good. And nobody can do that anymore. So if you needed to get through Nashville, which was always a problem for me, at a decent time of the day, in the middle of the day, man, then this break would come up, and then now you're just stuck trying to get through rush hour traffic, and then you're stuck. You can't get moving again. Yeah.
And there's no flexibility in this, right? Like you talk about the logbooks, the electronic logbooks. You could be a half an hour from home or half an hour from your stop. You gotta stop.
Yeah. And see, like, where I worked at, they would be like, if you're that close to home and you've been out, you roll on over. But you would get a nasty gram every month saying, hey, you had these log violations. And that way they're covering them. They've instructed you on it, told you not to do it, but they'll keep doing that month after month after month. So, like say you were at Topeka and you wanted to head on back and get to Salina, which is where I lived at back when I did that. You could do it. But if you got pulled over or inspected in between there, you would be in trouble. Yeah. For sure. Otherwise you just get a check mark by your name when you used to get in trouble in school. That's about all they do to you. But you better not try to come all the way in from like St. Louis when you're about out of time if you really want to get home. So yes, they are pretty hard and fast. I mean, there's a little bit of leeway, but you can't. And it's one thing if you're getting home, the company will probably say okay, but the company's going to want to know, why are you going all this extra time just to get somewhere else? They're not really going to allow that. They give you a little bit of leeway just for getting home, but it. Not very flexible though. And there's just no way to fix it anymore.
You mentioned parking as being an issue.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
It's terrible. It's terrible. There's not near enough truck stops for the amount of trucks out on the road. And it used to be a little better before we had this rigid, basically everybody's working on a 24-hour clock now. So you start out the day and everybody's getting done at the same time. So we used to joke and call them solar powered trucks because they wouldn't run at night. And a lot of these big fleets were doing these e-logs before a lot of other places were. So if you don't shut down by 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night, there's a good chance you're not going to find a parking spot at a truck stop. Now, the rest areas normally take a little bit longer to fill up, but they still fill up pretty early nowadays. And so then once you get past that, then you're looking for a parking lot. A lot of places will come get you towed out of there in the middle of the night if you try to just park in a parking lot where they don't want you at.
So you get caught in a loop where I'm going to make sure I understand this. Because of some of the rules we have in place, everybody's running on the same schedule. So everybody's in and up looking for a parking spot at the same time.
Yes.
If you don't find that parking spot because everything's filled up, So truck stop's your first option, a rest area. And this is why on the interstate, there's the rest area sign with the lit up number of parking spots.
Yeah, it was a total waste of money, though. I mean, why didn't they take that money and pay more parking spots?
Yeah.
Plus, there's apps now that will give you an idea of how full or empty a truck stop is. So that was 10 years too late, and whatever money they spent on that was just...
Could have built 3 more parking spots.
Yeah. And they could have done that at every one of these truck stops they monitor, and it would have helped a little bit. It wouldn't help enough.
The other thing I hear out of that, though, is because of that, there's limited parking, you can't find it, and you're out of time, but you're actually looking for a parking spot, so you're still driving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're trying, well, okay, hopefully the next place. And like I say, by the time I was done being over the road, I wouldn't care. I'd be like 6 o'clock, I'm pulling in. I mean, I could have drove 3 or 4 more hours a lot of those days. I'm like, I'm not chancing it. I'm just taking that stress out of my life. Well, that really cuts into your pay, cuts into your home time. I mean, it's a bad attitude, but that's one of the reasons I got out of it. My attitude had gotten real bad about it. You just really felt like your hands were tied. And then that's one of the other things too, yes, you want to try to get to a truck stop generally, so you can get up and have that coffee and have a restroom use, maybe get a shower, maybe get something else to eat that's not something that's, that you microwave in your truck. But then truck stops they're bad places. They're dirty. I mean, like I said, I was peeing in a jug. A lot of guys just get out and pee on the parking lot. I mean, that smells real nice in the middle of July. Let me tell you. They're bad that way. They gouge you so bad on the prices. The one chain in particular, Pilot, I'll call them out because they're terrible. They sell some of the cheapest fuel to all these big fleets in the country. Cheap. I mean, about as cheap as they can sell it. And their whole business model is they expect to make all that back up by gouging the truckers that come in there. So here you are, you're captive. I mean, my company basically dictated that we had to buy from them because the fuel was so much cheaper. Okay, that's fine. But when you buy fuel, then you get a free shower. Otherwise, you're paying $15 to take a shower. So that's the other thing. You'd like to try to find a Pilot. Pilot and Flying J are the same company. You'd like to find one of those so that night you can go in and get your free shower. Well, everybody else on the planet's filling up at these truck stops too because they got the cheapest fuel. So it makes it really congested to get into the place. So if you do get in there, then you'll get your shower for free. But if you got to buy anything else in there, it's just, it's marked up almost double what you'd pay at a grocery store. And it's, at least 50 cents higher what you pay at any other convenience store.
And that's out of your pocket.
That's out of your pocket. Everything out there is out of your pocket. Except, if it has to do with anything with the truck, the company will take care of it. But once it goes on beyond that, it's all out of your pocket. So we're saving the company money by buying fuel there. But when you want to stop there, then you're subsidizing what the company's saving.
I remember when you were doing that, it was a big, before you left for the week, this whole deal of you packing food and meals and snacks and everything. I mean, it was like you were hauling a lot. You had a refrigerator in your truck.
Yeah. And then see, that's the thing. And I guess I should clarify here right now. There's a lot of things that I liked about trucking, especially when I first started doing it. And it's not, I'm kind of complaining about all this first world problems here. Okay. Watch some of these documentaries about what these guys in these third world countries got to do to drive a truck. And we had it really easy. So I need to make that clear, and then you get in your truck and you have a bed back there. You got heat and cooling. You have a refrigerator. You can bring a microwave, you can TV, put a PlayStation in there, whatever. You have a little stuff there for when you're stuck, but you are living in this tiny micro apartment without any running water. Yeah. That's the trade-off. So I would pack all that stuff up and then, and for one to try to save money. But after there's only, 3 days of eating cold cut sandwiches, man, you're ready to sit down and eat a meal. Yeah. And whereas the meal would cost you $10, $12 at a regular restaurant in town, you can't get to that regular restaurant in town because you got this big giant truck that has to stay at the truck stop. So you're paying $15, $16 for the meal.
Yeah, because you're stuck.
Because you're stuck. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand. Yes, and I will admit I enjoyed, especially when I was new and I was going all over, the whole country. I mean, I've made it to all 48 states. I've been to all of the southern provinces of Canada, except Quebec. I've seen a lot of stuff I never would have seen if I hadn't done it. But at the same time, I only saw what I saw out of the windshield.
Yeah.
Okay. I drove by the Little Bighorn Monument up there in Montana a couple hundred times probably. See the building up on the hill. I didn't get to go check it out. You know, I drove right by Appomattox Courthouse, where they ended the Civil War at. Saw it as I'm driving by.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, so you get to see these things, but just out of the window, and then you're gone. You know, it's like you get to stop and check it out. But I mean, normally you wouldn't have time to do that anyway.
Yeah.
So yes, I've seen a lot of stuff, but I don't really feel like I've really been anywhere.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that's, I think people think that, you get to travel and see stuff. Yeah, and that was fun. I did enjoy it. But after a little bit, once you've been down most of these roads, there's nothing else to see. It's just, after a while, it feels like every interstate exit has a McDonald's and a Starbucks and a gas station. And it's the same whether you're in Virginia or Washington or Kansas or wherever. It all gets to seem the same.
It looks the same. You kind of get that blindness to it. It just looks like one place looks just like another.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we were talking a little bit earlier. I'll come back to some of these issues, but something that you said earlier, I want to make sure we talk about. You had said that you have a job now where you have lower pay, the benefits aren't as good as some of your previous jobs, and you're physically working harder.
In the elements a lot more too.
And you're out in the elements a lot more, and it's still a better job than over-the-road trucking.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Well, because
you're doing local routes.
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I go into work every day. I live a mile away from where I work. I go in every day at 7. I rarely, if ever, work later than 5 o'clock. And it's just, I'm home though. I get to see my wife. I get to see two of my kids. One doesn't live with me anymore, but I get to see them every day. I get to see my animals. I got off today before I came down here, man. I was able, because I got cold today working out in this stupid rain. I sit there in front of my little space heater and warmed up before I came down here, you know? I mean, in the truck, you'd be sitting there trying to blow the heat on you and wrapping up. And then you're like, I got to go into the truck stop and get some. I mean, it's just, you know, it's just so much better. You know, back then, if I wanted to watch any sports, I was trying to watch it on my little bitty phone.
Yeah.
You know, now I watch it on my TV, you know? When we get done here, I'm going to go watch some more World Series, you know? Yeah. I mean, it's just so.
Well, and I remember too, during that time, like we'd try to schedule things to get together. Yeah. We'd watch football games or, you know, have dinner or get our families together or whatever. And sometimes, you know, it would be like, well, I'm going to be on the road that week, and we'd be looking like 3 weeks out to try to plan anything. And then sometimes we'd have something planned and something would happen. You'd end up being on the road a day or two longer than you expected because you ran out of time or somebody wouldn't unload you or whatever.
Yeah.
It really makes it hard to have like any kind of, I guess, normal life.
Yeah. It's real hard to do that. And, you know, the other thing was, and I don't know a whole lot about this. I was a truck driver, but I do know you have dispatchers, you know, and people, I guess we should clarify, dispatchers normally work for the company you work for. They'll assign you loads outbound. They will find you the loads for your backhauls to get you back. Then there's also people called freight brokers. And what they do is they're a middleman between companies that need something shipped and a trucking company that was looking for a load to haul. But the dispatchers would sit there and they would want to know, you know, what time you're going to be empty. And that's real hard to figure out too, when you got 8 or 10 stops and you're just trying to spitball a number at them. And if you overshot it and you said Thursday morning and you got done noon on Wednesday, you're not going to have anything to pick up till probably Thursday afternoon. So you're stuck sitting. If you cut it too short, then they've made an appointment for you or expecting something, and then you're in trouble because you didn't get it done on time.
Yeah.
That just added a ton of stress to trying to figure that out. And this is one thing, and it's still, I never got used to it, but you would never know. You know that you were going to end up with 8 stops, and your last stop was going to be, say, in far eastern North Carolina. You had no idea where you were going to next, and they wouldn't tell you. part of that is, their job is to try to get the best paying freight to come back in. And they look on these boards, on these spot market boards, and it will say, there's a load there and we could take it, but let's wait another day and see if the price goes up, because these brokers start panicking. The longer it goes, they start raising the price. So it's their job to try to get the best deal, but they'd keep waiting. So my wife would be like, well, when are you going to be home? I have no idea.
Yeah.
You just didn't know. Now, there'd be certain part of the countries you'd have a decent idea where you'd be going, but as soon as you thought you had that figured out, now you'd be wrong and you'd be doing something totally different. So, to try to balance your home life, you would ask for, say, I need this weekend off. Okay, fine. They would make sure you got it. They were good about that. The downside of it was, though, you'd be leaving Monday, you need to be back in Friday afternoon. Well, they would send you on a load that would only keep you out till like Wednesday.
Yeah.
So you'd either have to burn another vacation day or 2 extra vacation days, and you wouldn't make any money that week.
Yeah.
Now, it got you home, but you were making a big sacrifice to do it, financially on that end of it. So it really got to a point, it felt like there's just a no-win situation here, because if you push it and push it and push it, then you get too far ahead and you're stuck waiting anyway. If you don't push it and you slack off a little bit, then something else comes up and then you're way behind and you're stuck, and you'll get to these, and this is another fun thing that so many times you're going to places you've never been before, and you'll pull in and you pull up and then some guy working there comes up yelling at you, hey, you dumb trucker, why are you up here? Didn't you read the sign back there? No, I didn't see a sign. Well, it's there. And, they'd be chewing on you and telling you where to go and do this and do that. And then, so, you drive out and you look back. Well, no wonder you didn't see the sign. It's overgrown with vines.
Yeah.
And that would happen a lot. So it's just all this, and nobody wants, there needs to be more truck stops. I think that would help a lot with the quality of life out on the road. There's still going to be a lot of other problems, but towns don't want truck stops in it. McPherson, where I live, they didn't want truck stops. They finally let a Love's move in, and their reasoning was, well, we don't want the prostitution and the drugs and this and that. I would wager, now they've had that Love's there 4 or 5 years now. I would wager we probably have the same amount of prostitutes and drugs in McPherson as we did before the truck stop came in. But they, that was just always a stereotype going on with it. And, truthfully, most of these truckers are so tired by the time they get done, they pull the curtains and they go to sleep.
Yeah. They're not out raising hell after spending all day on the road.
No. And I'm sure you go just about any place where trucks park, and if you want something bad enough, you'll be able to find it. But at the same time, it's not as widespread. It's not any worse than going to the bad part of town anyway.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot better than that,
Yeah.
But you can still find stuff.
So talk, as you're talking, I'm thinking like what I'm hearing is, there's a lot of stress in this work.
Yes.
And I know that it's like physically, it's not good for your health, right?
No,
you've had some bad trucks with bad seats, and you're in them all day long.
Yeah. You're in them all day long. And then, what do you do? You're driving that long at a time. It's really easy to grab another can of soda, another bag of chips, light up another cigarette. You're just killing time because you're driving down the highway. Yeah. And, and that's the other thing too. I think that people don't understand is, the easiest part about truck driving is driving down the open highway. If you didn't have to worry about weather and you could drive Kansas City to Denver back and forth again, it would be so easy you'd probably die of boredom. But that's easy to do. But what they're paying you for is to hit all these deadlines, to maneuver these trucks into places that have no business having a truck in them. And I've been to some places where I could spend 6 hours telling you about places that I've had to take a truck into that you shouldn't. And then they put even other stress on it. Like the place where I worked at, they had what they called out of route. They wanted you to keep your out of route miles down to a certain percentage.
Now, what does that mean?
Okay, so say it should be 1,000 miles, from this first stop to your last stop. Okay, they wanted you under 4% out of route. So that means you have 40 miles to play with. That includes when you're pulling off the road, going to truck stops, doing that. It might include that you look at the map and the way they got you routed is going through a really bad road and you want to stay on the interstate to get over to this town. When I first started, I followed that stuff religiously. I wanted to keep that knocked down. By the time I finished, I didn't care if I drove 200 miles out of route. If it was going to be an easier drive, it's just, but after a while, you're like, well, no, this way they're telling me to go is a really bad way. I've done that once before. I'm not doing it again. And then basically, they'd accumulate that over a month or a year, so you could get away with that sometimes. By the time I was done, I just didn't care. I'm like, I'm not driving down that horse trail in Kentucky. I mean, it's, blind corners and you don't have enough room to keep the truck on it, even if you take up all lanes and the shoulder. It is really bad.
And of course, they're using the technology to try to map the shortest route, right?
And they were pretty good about what they call practical miles, but some of those roads is just not practical anyway. There are things where you can set them up to go the shortest route and you would be on every back lane road possible. They didn't do that to us so much, but there would still be times they'd say, hey, the computer says it's saving 50 miles by cutting through this. Well, it's in the Appalachian Mountains. I mean, the first time you cut through US 50, we think of it out here as this nice wide open highway. Well, back in West Virginia, it's like they set a snake loose and followed it. I mean, it is curvy and up and down and round and round. I mean, it's just, you're so tired by the time you get through all that, and it'd be a great ride, in a sports car or a motorcycle, but it's a terrible thing when you're hauling freight through there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the technology thing, you mentioned that previously too, that we could be using technology to kind of reward drivers or change the pay structure or something, but in your view, it's pretty heavy-handed right now with the technology, and it's that hammer is coming down on the truck drivers. Yeah, because you have to, they're using that to keep track of your hours, to see where you're at, to do all that stuff. But then they'll turn around, but they could turn around and use this to say, look, the truck's in motion, it's going, it's moving, he's driving. Start his hourly pay. They could start paying you as soon as you hit the pre-trip button to do your inspection in the morning. You could, show that they could see that you're at a truck stop. Okay, he's getting fuel. You'd be getting paid then. I think it'd be really easy to set up a system where once you got to a shipper, you could check in with them. It would verify that you're actually there to get the load. And then, you could be getting paid then instead of getting one small flat fee that, hey, it might be, if they can load you up in 10 minutes, it might be worth the $15 they're giving you to pick up that load. But you're not going to be there that short. You should be getting paid, hourly the whole way through. I mean, also truckers are exempt from any kind of overtime rules. So anybody else that works 40 hours, once you work over that, you start getting overtime. Not when you're a truck driver. Yeah. You get the same pay, whether it's, the first hour of your week or the 70th hour of your week. Yeah. And like you said earlier, you're based on a 70-hour week.
You're based on the 70-hour week. And then not only that, truckers can't go on strike. It's illegal for truck drivers to strike. Okay. So you cannot, they have no collective bargaining. Plus, I don't think you can't get, if you have 3 truckers in a room, there's going to be one that disagrees with anything. I mean, so I don't think you'd ever pull them all together to get that to work anyway. But I mean, so you have no collective bargaining power. You have, you're exempt from overtime rules. I mean, that's just...
You're responsible for your own fines.
You're responsible for your own fines. You got to pay these exorbitant prices at truck stops that you're worried if you can even get into one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just, it really is it's thing that's really stacked against it. And like I said, that all being said too, that the actual pay at the end of the day, it was good pay, but it's not worth everything you had to do to get it.
So part of the reason you're here today talking about this is because of an article you sent me from the Washington Post in a text with a link to this story. And your message was, just about everything in this article is wrong. Yeah. So I want to have you kind of go through some of those things. And it's an opinion piece, and it's called "The Trucking Industry is in Crisis. Here's How Government Can Help." And it kind of goes through these things. But I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about, this talks about trying to recruit younger drivers, trying to recruit a broader mix of people into truck driving, some concerns with people aging out, wanting to get out of the industry, and kind of how that's playing into some of the supply chain issues. But I want to hear you talk about this article and some of the things that you think could be done to make trucking a more attractive career for people, or something that would have maybe kept you in it.
Okay. Well, I mean, the very first thing I saw is the two guys that he talked to when he wrote this article. He talked to the president of the American Trucking Association, which they represent the big trucking companies. They have... The only thing the American Trucking Association cares about is profits for their members, nothing else. So he should have never have talked to that guy. Then he talked to the guy that was president of another company still. And that guy did work his way up, as said in the article, but he still doesn't really in touch with what's going on. Then they talked about you have to be at least 21 to drive from state to state.
And they're talking about lowering that to 18.
Lowering that to 18. I mean, how responsible were you at the age of 18? I know you were.
You know exactly how responsible I was at 18.
Me too, right? Okay. Neither one of us would have had any business doing that at 18. Probably, most companies like to wait till you're about 23 because their insurance rates go down. And really, that's probably a pretty good age for it.
Probably worth noting that you can't rent a car generally until you're 25.
Sure.
Until you're 25.
Yeah. And your insurance rates go down when you turn 25.
Yeah.
So there's reasons why we have all this. I trained a kid one time that was 21. A great kid. I had a blast with him. Okay. But trying to rein him in, I finally got mad at him and had to yell at him that we were basically pulling a warehouse on wheels. We're not in his 4x4 pickup truck. Okay. Because he just drove that thing like he stole it.
Yeah.
And we were coming up onto winter weather and he didn't want to slow down. And I'm like, no, we slow down. Well, but there's guys passing us. So I was like, those are the guys we're going to see up here in the ditch in 10 miles. See how all these other trucks are in this line here? Well, I just want to get going. Well, he didn't have the judgment yet to realize that, that's going to take you longer. And see, that's another problem with being paid by the mile. You got to drive through bad weather. It's 10 times more stressful. It's really hard on you. By the time you get done driving on roads that might be slick, you're so tense, it's even hard to get to sleep. But you're still getting paid by the mile.
So your pay is like in half.
Your pay is like cut in half, and it's twice as much work. Yeah. But I mean, so I do not think that getting kids that young into it's good. One of the other things I said, I mean, the point he made in here that I do really, when he said infrastructure will help with driver recruitment and retention. If we improve our highways, make everything work better, yes, that would help. I'm all in favor of that. I don't think that's going to be the golden ticket, though, for driver retention, because there's too many other issues besides bad highways. But the one point he did make, they talked about bringing the National Guard in to help move some of the stuff around. He doesn't think that's practical because he says right here, I'll quote it, driving large trucks and unloading shipping containers safely and efficiently are skills that require training. And that's it. Part of the problem with truck driving is that they'll send you to like a 2-week truck driving school. I didn't get my CDL that way. I hired on at the beer company, and got my CDL that way, and then I moved on into it. But I was basically self-taught with that. It takes a long time to really know what you're doing. I mean, I look back now, I'm surprised those first couple of years I drove, I didn't kill myself or somebody else. And by that point in time, I was over 30 years old. But I don't know if 2 weeks of training would have done it. The problem is it's one of these jobs you almost got to apprentice with it somehow. And I don't see how any company is going to think that's practical to have 2 trucks going every place they go, but that would be the best way to do it. You could get the newbie up in front and actually have them drive, and then you have the other guy going, and you could work with them that way. When I train these guys anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks in my truck, even some of the best people I had, I was ready to throw them out of my truck by the time you were back. You're in too small of a place with each other for too long. So I don't really know what the answer is on that, but I do know that hiring 18-year-olds and giving them a couple weeks experience and sitting them out is not a good answer.
Yeah. And we don't, it's kind of a weird thing because everybody talks about like on the job training, but That's one thing when you're working in a warehouse or when you're working in a machine shop or something like that. But you talking about the warehouse on wheels, I mean, that's a big vehicle with a lot of weight and a lot of force.
Yeah.
That somebody's learning how to navigate that down a road.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, going down the highway, you can pick that up pretty quick. But, you get into these little bitty towns, and you got to make these hard, sharp corners. It's just, there's times even by the time I was done, I was pretty confident and had quite a bit of experience. So you're like, wow, how am I going to get through here? And that happens a lot. And I don't know how you do that. Plus you take the impatience of being young and you're just like, hey, let's go. And then they end up knocking stuff over and ripping things apart and everything else to it. They don't really understand the gravity of what you're dealing with. I mean, when you're fully loaded, that's 80,000 pounds that you've got to figure out how to get stopped. And so it's a lot there. It really is.
We mentioned earlier the DOT police. Mm-hmm. And I went on a run with you one time years ago.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to see what this was like.
Yeah.
And I got to see it. And we got pulled over by DOT police.
Yeah. Well, we didn't get pulled over. We stopped at the rest area there west of Salina.
Uh-huh.
And, so you volunteered for an inspection. Now,
that's right. That's right.
And so I'm mad because I wanted to just pee and get going down the road. But you're all ecstatic. Well, I get to interview this cop about this now. So, yeah.
But at that moment when I remember that, I was asking him a bunch of questions because at the time I was going to write a story about, trucking and some of these things. But at that moment, I mean, you're completely subject to that, right? It doesn't matter, where you're going, where you've been, what your time schedule is. And I remember that guy looked your truck up and down. And you said at the time, if they look hard enough, they will find a violation.
Yes, right? Yes, they can. You could probably have a brand new truck and trailer and pull it off the lot. And there's probably something that is not up to spec. Now, generally, my experience with the DOT cops has been, just be polite, be friendly. They'll cut you some slack if they're not going to let you go with something terrible. But if it's something little, a lot of times they'll be like, hey, just go up. You got to lie down. Go up there and fix it, and I'll forget I saw it. Okay, that'll happen a lot. But a lot of guys will get attitudes with these cops, right? Because they're stressed too. On top of it, trying to move stuff, and the cops costing them time, and so they just throw attitude, and then they'll get out the manual and they'll go through everything they can find to get you on.
And that's the DOT manual, which is about how many pages do you think? Or should we measure this in inches?
Yeah, probably. I mean, it can be real thick. It's I don't know if it's that big, but I had one time I had a guy tell me that, well, this and this, and it's in your DOT book. Well, I'm like, I don't have time to read a 500-page book, I mean, it's in there, but of course it's all wrote in legal mumbo jumbo, and they don't really set up anything practical to help these guys, to figure this stuff out. And then another thing that's really frustrating is these laws can vary some state by state. We were just talking about that the other day. You're allowed so much weight on each set of axles. Okay. But like in Kansas, for instance, on your stair axles, your front two that you steer with, you can have up to 20,000 pounds on that. But you go to some other states and it's only 12,000 pounds. You go to some other states and it depends on the rating of your tire and the size of it, how much weight you can carry on there. Now, there's a reason they're really strict on that, because if you lose a stair tire, that's about the worst thing that can happen to you, because it can cause wreck. It does and can and will cause a lot of wrecks. But it's like, can't we just have one uniform standard all the way around the country on this? No, they won't do that.
So it's different state to state.
Different state to state, yes. And the speed limits are different all the time. From state to state. I used to hate going into Indiana. It was a 70 for cars, 65 for trucks. The problem is that Indiana is one of these states where in order to do an inspection, you have to be doing something else wrong. Most states, and it's really better if they can just pull you over to do an inspection, because what happens is in Indiana, they'll pull you over for going 67 in a 65. Well, yeah, you really weren't speeding. I was worried. I just want to do an inspection. But he has to write down that you were speeding. Well, that goes against your score. as a driver. You have this thing called a CSA score that rates how good or bad of a driver you are. So you could get pulled over and he said, I'm just giving you a warning for speeding. But no, that's actually counting against you. And like at the company I worked for, that was the same as getting a ticket. Now, you didn't have to pay the money for the ticket, but you were in trouble. Our trucks were governed at 72. They would shut you all the way down to 68 for 3 months. So not only did that thing cost you, if you got a ticket or not, and you had to pay that, but it also cost you a lot of productivity because you couldn't drive your truck as fast.
So other things that you think might be worth doing. I mean, you talked about there's a lot that we could go, and we talked about logs, we talked about tickets, weight limits, pickup times. You mentioned something about emissions before about trucks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they put all these things in there, and I mean, something probably does need to be done with it, right? But in my experience, almost all the times that I broke down was because something in these emission control systems was breaking down. I just don't think the technology, I think it does its job at stopping the emissions, but it's not reliable enough yet. I was talking to a mechanic today, and he would guess somewhere probably 40 to 80% of all the breakdowns are caused by these emission systems. So, I mean, that's just another thing. That just kills productivity. I mean, if your truck's in the shop and who knows how long it's going to be there, then, and it's almost always because of these emission systems. Not only that, the emission systems, they cost some of your fuel economy. They're expensive. I mean, there's just a lot of things. You got to buy that diesel exhaust fluid to put in there. That's just another cost. Now, the company pays for that, but that's just another cost there that they have that they couldn't pass on to the driver, in better wages or profit for them, or however you want to look at it. So, like I say, I sure don't want these trucks belching out black smoke, but it seems like this is hitting our emission goal, even though the engineering's not that good and the trucks are breaking down more often. And they just kind of left it that way. That's a problem, with that. I just don't, there's just so many things that just keep piling up and make this a bad job. But it's all industry wide. I know guys that have gone from one trucking company to the next, and at the end of the day, it's the same story.
Yeah.
And your pay doesn't really vary a whole lot. They might put you in a shinier truck, but then you're probably going to make less money because they're paying more for that fancy truck. Mm-hmm. Or they give you or they pay you more, but they put you in a junk truck that couldn't even pass inspection. So, it's just one thing after another. And also at the same time, I have no sympathy for the big mega fleets. They're the ones that govern the trucks. They're the ones that these slow guys are going down the road and they're getting in your way. And you want to be like, why are you working for a place that makes you drive so slow? Especially on 2-lane highways like US 54 out here in western Kansas, there's nowhere to pass. And you're stuck behind one of these trucks that's governed at 62 miles an hour. It's really hard in another big truck to get around them.
Yeah.
Especially when you can only go 72. So I don't have any sympathy for these great big trucking companies, but a lot of these smaller and mid-sized places, they're struggling to keep everything going too. It's not like they could just magically write out a check to pay truck drivers more. I mean, the money's not there because the freight prices are depressed by these big giant companies.
They keep the prices down, and they get the contracts on that because they have the power to do that.
And the volume. They make all their money off of volume instead of, off of anything else. They're just, we'll do enough volume, we'll make money on this.
So then that makes the smaller trucking companies have to try to compete at that level. And it's harder. And they still have to meet all the same regulations and try to be competitive on pay and things like that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, like, say you got a company with 100 trucks, and when they put the electronic log mandate in place. Okay, they had to buy 100 e-logs. Now, I know that a big carrier that has, 8,000 trucks had to buy 8,000 of them. But I promise you're getting each one way cheaper when you buy 8,000 than when you're buying 100 of them.
Yeah.
So, and then it's even worse if you're a guy that just owns your own truck. I don't know how any of those guys do that, honestly. There are guys out there that make money, but it is really tricky to be an independent truck driver and, own your own truck and try to make a go of it.
Yeah, because they're on the hook for all the fees, all the charges, all the upgrades, all the repairs, everything.
Yes, everything. Yeah. And I mean, you want an eye opener. Everybody gripes about how much tires cost for your car. Go look at what a pair of steer tires for a semi truck will cost you. I mean, last time I really looked, it's been like 2.5 years since I really looked at that, but for like $400 to $600 for one.
For one tire.
For one tire, yeah. So if you're replacing 2 of those, you can imagine what that is. And on those steer tires, they'll get you about 125,000 miles.
Yeah, which how many miles did you drive a year, you think?
About that. About
125,000 miles or so?
Yeah.
So back up a little bit. When you first got into this and you talked about how you really liked it and everything, what initially drew you to trucking?
I don't know. I mean, I had an uncle and a grandpa that both did it, so it's probably a little bit in my blood. But it was, being independent, being out on the road. And the first time you get up in a big old truck and you're just going down the highway, I mean, it feels cool. I mean, there's a lot of power there. It really is a bit of a thrill, just controlling that whole thing. But that wears off, after a while. And, there's that. And I did want to go out and see other things. And, I'd been stuck in Kansas way too long. And it's real funny, though. You do it, you want to get out of Kansas. So by the time you're done, you don't ever want to leave Kansas again. So it's, I'd always be happy every time I crossed back into the state line, no matter what part of the state I was coming back into. You're ready to be home.
Yeah, because you knew you were home.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to me about, we've touched a lot of issues here, but if you had the power and somebody said, we're going to listen to Tim Smith for one day and we're going to try to implement a change that he offers that might solve this problem or might make this problem better, what would it be? Knowing that we've talked about a lot, it sounds to me like there's been a lot of neglect in kind of addressing some of these issues for a long, long time. And probably I'm getting the sense that we haven't really gone and talked to people on the ground level to find out what the real problems are.
Yeah.
So we've let kind of industry insiders or high ups and trucking corporations kind of set the policy tone on this. But we haven't done a good job of getting down to truckers. And asking them what's wrong and how we could make it a more appealing career. And now we're in a crisis because of it. But what would you do? What would you say would make it better? One thing or 3 things or 5 things that you think would make it better?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that would probably help, LTL companies, less than truckload. So that's, these trucks you see going up and down the highway with like pup trailers, 2 trailers. UPS does the same thing when they're hauling their goods from one distribution center to another. Those guys, they all have hubs and they're all spread out far enough out. So generally a guy will come into work, hook up his trailers, take them off to another place, another hub that's probably 4 or 5 hours out. They'll unload and they'll turn around and come back. Okay, with another load coming back their way to get it, further down the line. I think that might be something that really needs to be looked at, because if you could have it where guys could still be home all the time, but you still be getting the goods moved, the problem is you got so many companies competing and they're all cutthroat with each other, but some degree of cooperation. So I think one of the best things you could do would be to set it up where guys are able to go out and get back and still have some kind of home life. I mean, I think that's the number one thing. If they did do a big effort to recruit younger people to do this, really, like I say, start them out at 22 or 23 and try to sell them on this idea. I wish I would have thought of this and done this, but if you could go out there and live in a truck for 3 or 4 years when you're young and able to handle this and do all this, and it's still an adventure, and only come home and crash in your parents' basement, you could save up a bunch of money. I mean, you really can't hardly get a blue-collar job that will pay better than this without a lot more, technical training and years to build up to get to that level.
Yeah.
That would be a great way to do it. And, you tell these kids, hey, you save half your money and do it for 4 years, you're going to have a really nice down payment to put on a house. And you could go work a cheaper job because you're not paying so much on your mortgage. That would be the only way I see getting young people into it. If you can't get guys home so much, then really there needs to be some kind of, if it's public-private partnership or whatever, to get more truck parking available for guys. That would take away a lot of stress.
I want to hit this real quick because you've had an idea before that I want about you doing a public-private partnership with rest areas and truck stops.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I mean, just, like I say, as I was making fun of the boards that say how many truck parking spots are open. You can say it doesn't really do any good at all. And like I say, take that money and say, or we're going to, you're going to build this new truck stop here, and they're trying to make money at this whole thing too. And we've put so much, land here. Well, we're going to throw in to help you buy a few more acres here, and we will fund you to put in, 50 more parking spots, expand at these existing truck stops, get parking built. That might be the most stressful thing that somebody could fix. Infrastructure, that needs to be fixed too, but that takes years to get going. You got to get all these negotiations done to get it done. And then building a bridge takes a long time, so that's real slow. Obviously, the weather is another huge stressor. You can't do much about that, but we can pretty easily add on to these truck stops, make them bigger. A lot of them are sitting out in a wheat field somewhere. There's plenty of room for them to grow. They just need to get the land and pave it. Yeah. And I know it's not even that simple. You got to worry about drainage and but there's still ways we could do this and make this thing better. And they're just, it's like they're dragging their feet. When these truck stop companies come in and put a place in, they're saying, we got this many trucks, we're building it for this much. And it'll fill up every night and they're good. And the other thing is that I think would be another thing we could look at is, so many towns are opposed to having truck stops in them. But hey, you don't eat unless the truck comes to your town. Okay? The shelves are empty unless the truck comes to your town. What your town produces, manufactures, however you look at it, there's no money to be there unless the truck comes and picks it up and gets it out of there. Yeah. So whether you want trucks in your town or not, they're going to be there. You don't even necessarily have to have a truck stop. Have every town that has a certain size to it, make them have an area somewhere within walking distance of a convenience store that's 24 hours and a couple restaurants, just so a guy can get parked in there. Have a like a little mini rest area, with some bathrooms there, so you got that available. So a guy's just not stuck on an island. I think that would be one of the biggest things that would help. The other thing is that guys get stuck out on the road so much. I was lucky. I had a place that wanted us to come back so we could pick up more of the product and get it going again. A lot of these big mega fleets, they say every week you're out, you earn 1 day at home. And, so, hey, 6 weeks out, I want to go take 6 days at home. Oh, no, we'll run this for me real quick. Well, I got to have you run this now. And they just keep abusing these guys, not getting them home. There's got to be more incentive to get these guys home. I think that would help a lot too. But that just messes with their business model. And so, I don't see how enough truck drivers could ever get that to change, because there's too many guys who are still willing to do it. Companies are willing to take advantage of them. So, that's kind of a pipe dream too on that. But I do think more parking, and this is another thing too. When we designed the interstates from city center to city center, and we basically design these to transport goods quicker. The public gets to enjoy them. You get out on vacation quicker or whatever. But really, it was to move goods. And then what are you doing? Running it from the most congested part of the city all the way across to the next most congested part of the city. They should have built these things like 40 miles away from the city center. And so if that was the city you were going to, you'd drop down and go to it or something. Yeah. They built these loops around, but they're just as congested as going right through the middle of the city in most towns. Yeah. So, there's so many things that we've done over the years that have just made this worse and worse. And, the population growth has been so much the past 50 years, more and more people on the road, more and more distracted drivers. There's just a lot of stressors with it. I am really so glad now that I don't drive more than like 120 miles in a day. And most of that is on rural U.S. state or county blacktops, It makes it a lot nicer.
Because you've talked about that before, that the traffic, there's more cars on the road. Yeah. And more of those people are driving with their cell phone in their hand. And you see that all the time.
Oh, constantly. You really see it when you're set up in a truck because you can look right down inside any car. You see some other interesting stuff too. But yeah. And so, they're looking at their phones and not paying attention. And, and then sometimes, you won't even know you've done it. You might have merged into another lane and didn't realize the guy was coming up behind you really fast. And so then you made him mad. Then he'll whip around you and then he'll brake check you.
Yeah.
And, in a perfect world, you wouldn't even worry about it. You just roll on through. But hey, you've got a whole lot on the line here, so you got to be careful. And, then your load shifts on you. I mean, it's just, people will do just bad stuff and they don't have any idea, that your truck might be governed, that, all these things. You're in their way and they make you mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting, the governing, where they reduce the speed of your motor. You're right. People don't understand that. There's a lot that people don't understand. Or they don't understand load shifting. Like if you have to hit your brakes real fast, everything moves in that truck and now your whole balance is different than it was.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So
along those lines, what is something aside from those things, or one thing that you wish the general public knew about trucking or being a truck driver?
No, I don't. I mean, I just wish people would really just understand that the vast majority of these guys are husbands, fathers, brothers, grandfathers, whatever. And like I say, they're normally, almost anytime you see a wreck that has a truck involved in it, I would say 98% of the time it's not the truck driver's fault. They really are pretty dedicated to being safe and conscientious about getting down the road. And, you just, and it's just, like I say, it's a hard life. I mean, I will never say I'll never do that again, but it would be really hard for me to ever want to go back and get on the road again. It just really would be. I don't know. Maybe if they could, pay me $150,000 a year and promise me a really easy route and good weather, then maybe I'd do it. But otherwise, there's just too many downfalls to it anymore.
Yeah, too hard of a job.
It's just too hard of a job. Like I say, the pay's good, for not having a college degree or anything, but it's not enough for what you got to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming here today and talking with us a little bit and helping us understand. I think it's important, I see things in the news and I think it's really important to, like I said, go to the source and find out what's really going on. And I'm really glad that you let me talk you into coming down here today.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. A lot of stuff I wanted to get off my chest anyway. So
thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank a few of the people who've helped make That Podcast in Hutch possible. My son Mitchell Probst wrote and recorded the music for the show. Jenny Brigette put together some great graphics and promotional art. And Chris Acker helps overcome my mistakes to produce a great sounding product every episode. That Podcast in Hutch is made possible through a collaboration between the Hutchison Arts and Culture Collective and Salt City Sound. They're working to bring resources and infrastructure to support art, music, and storytelling in our community. If you have an idea for your own podcast, reach out to them at podcasts@saltcitysound.net. If you enjoy That Podcast in Hutch, be sure to subscribe and share it with all your friends. You can also help support this production by subscribing to thatguyinhutch.substack.com or by emailing me at thatguyinhutch@gmail.com to learn about sponsorship opportunities. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next week.
A Salt City Sound production.